Good evening, everybody. So, we're about to begin our evening, so I want to thank everybody very much for coming this Sunday evening as we remember our brother, Father Malcolm. Very good. Now, this one next. Very good. Okay, so thank you. Just to invite everybody this evening for this moment in which we can remember Father Malcolm. Remember all that he has contributed in our own individual lives, but also the services he's given to the people of Guyana through difficult times, and we want to pay tribute to him for what he's done as we prepare for our funeral service tomorrow. So I'm going to hand you over now to Michelle Abraham, who will guide us through this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Paul. Your Lordship, Bishop Francis Alain, former President of Guyana, Donald Ramotar, Regional Superior for the Jesuits of Guyana and Jamaica, Father Peter McIsaacs, other priests, religious sisters, friends all, welcome to Our Lady of Fatima Church here in Georgetown, and to this evening of reflection and sharing on the life and legacy of Father Malcolm Rodrigues SJ. We'd like to also bid a warm welcome to those who are watching us on Catholic Media Guyana, both on Facebook as well as on YouTube. We do have some tributes that were sent in virtually that we will be sharing as well. And we have a number of persons committing to tributes, and I'm sure some of you came this afternoon for the opportunity to also share on your own experiences and reflections and moments shared with the late Father Malcolm. So we will get right into the tributes this afternoon. And perhaps there are so many facets to Father Malcolm's life that an hour and a half may be inadequate for us to capture it. But in the interest of time, and in order for us to really have a rounded reflection, I think it's important for us to begin to capture Father Malcolm's life from someone who shared a number of childhood experiences with him. I'd like to invite his niece, Daphne Dukram, who will come forward first, and Daphne will also share a short tribute from Father Malcolm's sister, and then we will move along. It's now 15 minutes to the 5 o'clock hour, and of course appreciating all of your time, we hopefully can go to about 6:30, and we will intersperse our afternoon, our evening's tributes with small interludes of music as well. So we begin with Daphne and Father Malcolm's, Daphne is Father Malcolm's niece, and then Father Malcolm's sister has a virtual tribute, I think. Father Malcolm's cousin, Daphne Dukram.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm here on behalf of Monica, which is Father Malcolm's sister, who's asked me to say a few words on her behalf as well as her children abroad. She is not of the best of health at the moment, so she was unable to come across here. This is what she sent and asked. My brother Malcolm was a wonderful man. As a family, we all followed his life in the Jesuit priesthood with much pride in all that he achieved over the years. His legacy will live on in all that he did for the people of Guyana so selflessly. I am Malcolm's youngest sister, Monica. now the last surviving sibling of the 10 Rodrigues children. I'm so very sad not to be with you all today celebrating his life and his achievements, but I'm sure he will be watching over us all. Thank you to every one of you who cared so wonderfully for him during his final years and supported him throughout his long illness. Sleep peacefully, Marks, until we all meet again. God bless you all, Monica. And on behalf of myself and family, I would like to extend condolence to the Jesuits of Guyana as well as the Catholic community. Malcolm was such a very wonderful guy. He will be so dearly missed to the family and to the rest of Guyana. Sleep in peace, my dear cousin, Daphne.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Not sure how many of you had a chance to see the Catholic Standard this weekend, but there were several bits in this weekend's edition of the Catholic Standard. But perhaps as we go through this evening, I'll share with you bits and pieces from what was captured in the Catholic Standard, also what was captured in Kaicho newspaper, in the Stabroek newspaper, since Father Malcolm's passing last Sunday. But we continue with the tributes now here at Our Lady of Fatima Church, and we continue to welcome those persons who are coming in. And as mentioned, in addition to the persons who indicated that they've got tributes to share, we do know that there are several of you in our midst who perhaps would have tributes that you would like to give as well. As we try to capture Father Malcolm's life, whether it's in justice, advocacy, elections, while he was superior for the Jesuits, his apostolic work, his personality, his impact on all of Guyana. But I'd like now to invite Vanda Rodrigues as she gives a tribute on behalf of Mrs. Pat Rodney and her children, and young Carter as well. So Vanda comes forward now.
Good evening, all. Malcolm Rodrigues, an honorable man. Condolences from the Rodney family. We are saddened by the passing of our dear friend, Father Malcolm Rodrigues. Father Malcolm stood and worked with Walter Rodney and other comrades in the fight for workers' rights and justice for the Guyanese people. In a case of note, Father Malcolm, Walter, and many others took a principled stand against the prosecution of Arnold Rampersad. There are lessons to be learned from their principled stance against the use of race as a divisive tool and the practical application of racial understanding and unity for Guyana. On a personal note, Father Malcolm was our protector on the terrible night of June 13th, 1980, when Walter was assassinated by the Burnham regime. Malcolm stood with us, delivering that news, staying overnight to comfort the family, and then being a witness to the police raid of our home the following morning. Without him, it would have been impossible to traverse the roadblocks created to view and claim Walter's body. Father Malcolm was a confidant and supporter during the horrific aftermath. His warm friendship and support continued long after we left Guyana, and we are forever grateful for his strength and kindness. We will miss this rebel priest whose smile and love for life and humanity was all-encompassing. May his soul rest peacefully with the ancestors. From Patricia Rodney, the Rodney family, Shaka, son, Kanini, and Asha, daughters. With love. I'd like to just add, if I may, a note from Dr. Keith Carter, the eldest son of Martin Carter, our beloved national poet. Keith writes, "Kindly acknowledge Father Malcolm Rodrigues, who conducted Martin's funeral service at Sacred Heart Church on Main Street on December the 18th, 1977, in spite of some serious efforts at sabotage just outside the church. This was in the aftermath of another travesty of a national election." Martin and Malcolm, they are now again together, enjoying their music, poetry, and laughter, almost 25 years to the day of Martin's death on December the 13th, 1977. Malcolm and Martin together, enjoying their affinity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanda Radzik. Reading an excerpt from notes prepared by Father Dormont Preston. He wrote, "Father Malcolm is recognized as one who stood firmly for justice." We were hearing about it just now from Vanda. He was always ready to speak out to defend the rights of the poor, even at great cost to him. As a young priest, he became a brave and articulate critic of the dictatorship's gross infringements of human rights in Guyana. On a national stage, he was a significant player in finally bringing about free and fair elections in Guyana. In a country where political corruption is often the norm, Malcolm had the reputation among all sections of society as a man of integrity. That's an excerpt from notes by from Father Dormont Preston. At this time, I now invite former President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, Mr. Donald Ramotar, for his tribute.
Good evening, everyone. I am happy to have this opportunity to say a few words to one of Guyana's patriots, a man who was obviously moved by a sense of justice and fair play, and who could not keep quiet and could not remain inactive in times of difficulties. I can't remember exactly when I first met him, and I must admit I was not extremely close to him in a very, very personal way. But in the process of the struggle that this country went through during the 1970s, 1980s, we came into contact on several occasions. And I had the opportunity of witnessing his tremendous organizational ability, his oratory was also great. I never heard him, I never came to church to hear him from here, but I heard him at other political levels, and how articulate and brilliant he was. He distinguished himself in struggles of ordinary people, particularly working people. And I think they say the times make the man, and he was a product of his time. I believe, if I'm not wrong, that he was influenced a lot by the liberation theology that the church was going through, particularly from the 70s with the Buff brothers in Brazil. And he was one of those in the Catholic Church in Guyana who took a stand. And today I remember Father Wong. I don't know how many of you remembered Father Wong, who was one of the first Catholic priests that I can remember that took a stand on the side of the poor and oppressed. And he was the editor that changed the Catholic standard and made the Catholic standard popular. He had his bicycle stolen almost every week. But he wrote, I think he was to show the power of the dictatorship at that time, and even the influence that it had in the church. In 1973, he wrote an article in the Catholic Standard describing the elections of 1973 as a fairy tale elections, and he was removed as editor of the church, of the Standard. But as the old saying say, sometimes you jump from the frying pan into the fire, and then you got Father Morrison. But Malcolm was there. He came and he associated with those struggles. The Rodney family remembered him, his contribution together with Walter and others, Chetty Jagan, Janet Jagan, Miles Fitzpatrick, many others, who formed the Arnold Rampersad Defense Committee and who did a tremendous amount of work to free an innocent man who had to face the court on 3 occasions because they seem to have been determined to hang him as an example to those of us who were struggling for a better life in Guyana. And Malcolm was one of those distinguished persons. You remember also we had not only the local support, that Arnold's case moved so many people to join with the PPP to form this broad committee to free him. Maurice Bishop came here, Margaret Burnham, who was the lawyer who defended Angela Davis, was here, and all of them worked together with Malcolm, and it was that combination of opposition that helped us eventually to free Arnold, who is still alive today and has never forgotten and always grateful for the support that he got from all those people who helped to free him. I remember also the 177-day strike in the sugar industry, when the sugar workers struck after they had had an agreement with the Gaisuco, and the government changed the agreement, and they struck to defend industrial democracy. Malcolm was very active in that strike, and he helped a lot the union in order to raise funds to sustain them through those difficult periods. He was also there when the bauxite workers were tear-gassed in their cells and attacked. He also gave his total solidarity and support and help also to sustain those workers in those very, very difficult times. Malcolm was mentioned in the assassination of Walter Rodney, the role that he played, and the comfort and support that he gave to that family. And we just heard a message from them, and I saw today the short but beautiful letter from Pat Rodney thanking Malcolm for the role that he played in that time. But he was more than that. He created, together I think with Lawrence Lachman Singh, I don't see him here. Oh, he's there, Lawrence. The Election Affairs Bureau that helped to bring free and fair elections in 1992. And he did a remarkable job. He did a remarkable job in ensuring, because we were all anxious, I can speak for myself, my heart was always in my mouth when we were hoping that these elections would have been free and fair. And I was always wondering what rabbit the government will have to pull from under their hat. But the broad support that was there for democracy, to return this country to democracy, Malcolm played a very, very important role in that struggle as well. To sum it up, he was, in a nutshell, he was always there when ordinary working people needed him. He was always in the thick of things, and he never shied away in taking a stance. He didn't make some of the diplomatic commentary, but he always took a stand, and he took a stand with the poor and the oppressed. And that is how I will remember him. And for those of us, including myself, who had the opportunity of holding high office, I hope that we will never forget that we were standing on shoulders of people like Malcolm Rodrigues. His contribution, it's a pity that in our country we don't have the culture of writing more and more. Very few of our leaders wrote a lot. But this Malcolm's life is a life, I hope some young student, some student of history can probably take up the challenge to research him and to write a biography, because many of our young people have no understanding of our history. Many of them know nothing about this period, which is a relatively short time ago. And we cannot blame them for that. We have to blame ourselves. We have to blame sometimes our school system, where we don't teach our own history. But I hope someone will take, I don't know nothing about his childhood and his early life. I do know sometimes when I was young and growing up in the struggle with Malcolm, this is one personal aspect on a lighter note. In the 70s and so forth, he was young and vibrant, and he was very handsome. And I thought it was a good thing that he became a priest, because he would have been a major competition to many of us around at that time. But I don't know anything about that aspect of his life. The only thing I knew was the life of struggle. I met him several times. The last time I think we had a long conversation, I believe it was probably in 2014 of September, Amerindian month. I met him at Bartika at one of the celebrations there, and we had a long conversation. That was the last long conversation we had. I saw him a couple of times others to greet him, but we reflected on some of the difficulties and struggles that we went through. I would say, in extending deepest sympathy to the family, to the church, and to all the organizations that he belonged to, extend deepest sympathy to them. But I believe that we can all, those of us who knew him, those of us who appreciated him, those of us who loved him, can be comforted by the thought and the fact that he lived a purposeful life. He made a major contribution. I think he went way beyond the call of duty as a priest and did a lot for the working people of this country. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, former President Mr. Donald Dramatar. And responding to your invitation for any young or not so young person to write that biography capturing the earlier life of Father Malcolm, I tried this week to do some of it. Like a fun fact I didn't know about Father Malcolm is that, well, he was versatile. He spoke Spanish. He ran a marathon at age 60. I could attest, former President, about your perhaps sneaky admission of his good looks. But if we were to ask our priests who are present in our church to stand, you would see that perhaps that is a quality to be a priest now. We have rather good-looking priests and good-looking sisters. No wonder the Catholic Church continues to be alive and vibrant. But this evening we are reflecting and celebrating the life of Father Malcolm Rodrigues SJ. He received one of Guyana's highest national awards, the Cacique Crown of Honor, in 2016. He was 81 years of age, and he died last Sunday, the 4th of December. Just pulling out some of what persons have been sharing about Father Malcolm in the newspapers, in conversations, I guess I can summarize it to being that he is being remembered as a simple, a polite, intelligent, prayerful, and passionate priest. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Sister Julie Matthews from the religious order, the Mercy Sisters, to now give a tribute.
My deepest condolences to the Jesuit community and to all of us in the church in Guyana. I will be very short because I know they have a lot of people to talk. I would like to basically talk about Father Malcolm as a friend of the Sisters of Mercy. And one thing I would like to say about him is that he was always available. He was very generous with his time. He served on many boards, very high-powered boards in Guyana, in the Caribbean. And yet he was able to serve on our Mercy Boys' home that only have 8 boys. It was not too much for Father Malcolm to be present in the big things as well in the small things. He served for many years at Mercy Wings, Vocational and Daycare Center, on the board. He was at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital. He came every week to the orphanage and brought movies to show the boys. He came to Mass, to say Mass, celebrate Mass with the sisters at a convent in Meadowbrook and in other places. You would see him all around Mercy Hospital visiting the sick and always, as I said, available to celebrate Mass in the chapel at Mercy Hospital. He was truly a friend of the sisters. At the end of Corinthians 13, we talk about faith, hope, and love. And I describe Malcolm as that sort of person, a person with deep faith. His faith was strong, and he lived it out in action, as many of you said today who spoke so far about his sense of justice. But Malcolm was also very hopeful and positive. His hope went beyond believing that things would get better. He believed that good always triumphed over evil, even when we could not see it. His hope was in the deep conviction that all things come to good in Christ Jesus. I believed he lived the words of Julian of Norwich: all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. And of course, the greatest of these is love. Malcolm loved God, and his love flowed out to all in need. When you were with Malcolm, you could be yourself. His ability to be accepting and loving was truly an expression of God's love. If I were to briefly sum up my relationship with Malcolm, I would like to quote the words from Thomas Merton. The beginning of love is the will to let those we love be perfectly themselves, the resolution not to twist them to fit our own image. If in loving them we do not love what they are, but only their potential likeness to ourselves, then we do not love them. We only love the reflection of ourselves we find in them. And Malcolm, my dear friend, you loved me and loved each of us as we are. So you did the will of love and of God, as Thomas Merton said. Faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love.
Thank you, Sister Julie Matthews from the Mercy Sisters, or that tribute on behalf of the Mercy Sisters. Father Malcolm was born on our Republic Day. It's noteworthy that, he was such a patriotic man, as we are hearing, to be born on the 23rd of February. He was a Catholic priest for 49 years, and as mentioned just now, he received the CCH, the National Award CCH, in 2016 from a fellow CCH recipient. I'd like to call it another patriotic Guyanese for his tribute, Monsignor Terence Montrose.
Father Malcolm was ordained 2 years before me, and for years we lived together in Brigham. He in the Jesuit Presbytery, I in the Cathedral Presbytery. And we had many long conversations. There are two things I want to remember of Father Malcolm. One happened on the quarantine. I was vocation director for a long time, and I had a student. A youth forum was being offered. And I thought it would be good for the seminarian to go to that convention. When he got there, he was rejected. He was rejected because of his race. Malcolm came along and saw him standing outside. He said, "What are you doing there?" He said, "They don't want me inside." Malcolm made sure he got inside and participated in the discussions. The second one was a situation in Brigham. We had a party for the children, but we got so much food, I didn't know what to do. Malcolm said to me, "I'm coming back just now." Malcolm brought about 200 young children from Breeder Street, Leopold Street, all around that area. The party was full, and everybody had what they wanted. They enjoyed themselves. Those are the two things I will remember about Malcolm for a long time.
It's 12 minutes after 5 Guyana time, and we are receiving tributes coming in virtually. I'd like to share the next two tributes. One will be played as a voice note, the other one will be read by me. This is going to be a tribute from Dr. David Singh, and his tribute goes like this. Father Malcolm was a lot more than a fighter for justice and for the rights of the poor and the marginalized. He was a lot more than an educator and an environmentalist. He was a good human being. I knew Father for most of my life, and I have no doubt that my choice of career in conservation has been influenced a lot by him. When I first returned to the university, I got a chance to work closely with Father Malcolm as he was setting up the Environmental Studies unit, and as a chemist, I had an interest in environmental monitoring. It was out of this association that we were asked to lead the work to assess the impact of the Omai cyanide spill, along with Simone Mangal, and Simone's tribute will follow. And then there was the work we did to assess the levels of mercury in the Mazaruni River Basin. We were on our first mission to Parima to meet and discuss with the village council and people to introduce and have their agreement to undertake the very first mercury assessment of the area. We got there on the Friday, the day before the entire village celebrated the Sabbath. After meeting the village council, Father informed us that as a practicing Seventh-day Adventist village, we would have to respect the Sabbath. The next day, just after breakfast, he informed us that he was going to church and inquired if anyone wanted to come along. He was never a voice of command, only encouragement. Needless to say, we complied. It was a very long service indeed. Father waited until he was invited to speak at the end of the service. And by then, it was after midday, and that was perhaps when my career took the turn it has taken to now. Father Malcolm's intense sense of social responsibility, coupled with his training as priest and his deep empathy with the condition of people, made him one of the most compassionate persons I knew. And he acted from that place of compassion without thought for fame or recognition. And he was incredibly humble. And this is how I will always remember him. Stepping up, stepping down, stepping in. Nothing was too large or too small for him if it could change the life of someone or of society. And he did this with absolutely no interest in recognition or in position. He lived in true terms what he believed that Jesus would have done in our Guyana. As a young man, I learned from people like Father Malcolm what it meant to stand up for what was right, just, and fair. And as I grew older, he was always a presence in my life. That's the tribute from Dr. David Singh. And now I will play the tribute from Simone Mangal Jolie of Canada.
Good afternoon, everyone. Father Malcolm Rodrigues and the Catholic priests of his generation gave me an extraordinary gift as a young Catholic child. They lived their lives in ways that made it easy for me to understand what Jesus was about and what he would have done if he were alive in the Guyana I grew up in. They stood up for right and wrong in every facet of national life. Importantly, without hope of any reward. And in that they gave me a second gift, the knowledge that moral fabric is finding the difference between right and wrong, and the bravery to name it, even if one may be visited only by misfortune as a consequence. In this, Father Malcolm lived an exemplary life. All of us in Guyana have benefited from his lifetime of national contribution as an educator, as an early environmental leader, and as a worker against political oppression. First in the politics of resistance, or politics with a big P, directly engaging with political parties of the 1970s and 1980s. And then later from 1991, in politics with a small p, or citizens' politics, focused on electoral observation. I was recently reminded by a friend that electoral work was only a sliver of Father Malcolm's life, but it is an important sliver, and if you would allow me, I believe it is one for us to all remember and reflect on. I was a student when our elders formed the Electoral Assistance Bureau in 1991 to empower citizens from all over the country to monitor elections. Father Malcolm led the EAB faithfully as chairman of the Management Council from 1991 until his body failed him and the EAB faded. I was fortunate to work alongside him as the finance officer and secretary of the Management Council from 2006 to 2014. The mammoth task of setting up a nationwide electoral observation mission. The risks, the thousands of citizens of every ethnicity, age, and economic class from all over Guyana that had to be brought together, that were brought together. The many months of navigating the trauma, yes, trauma, that comes with every elections in Guyana. The toil to hold the line. Some got a taste of this in 2020 and are still talking about the role they played. But Father Malcolm showed up every election since 1992. 1998, 2001, 2006, 2011. And he did his darnest to hold the line between order and chaos. He did it with dignity and grace. And it is fair to say that he did help hold that line, that the EAB did contribute to holding the country together many times without public fanfare or even the public's awareness. But elections observation is not where I first had the opportunity to see Father Malcolm at work. I worked with him in 1995 in response to Guyana's first national environmental disaster, when the Omai Gold Mines Limited tailings pond dam collapsed, spilling thousands of tons of toxic cyanide and heavy metals into the Essequibo River. Those of you who are old enough would remember this. Father Malcolm was then the head of the Environmental Studies Unit at the University of Guyana, which had been recently set up with support from the European Union. He led a 3-member first responder national assessment team appointed by the then President Chetty Jagan. I was the geologist on that team, and Dr. David Singh, the chemist. We traversed the blood-red Essequibo River, collecting water and soil samples, talking to villagers, watching fish, even those the size of haimaras, tumble in the death waters. The horror of those days spent on the water were formative for me. We discussed the responsibility we had as humans to protect the land, water, air that gives us life. We talked about the consequences of economic greed and recklessness, of lopsided agreements with multinational foreign firms, and why Guyana must never find itself in a situation like that again. I'm grateful to Father Malcolm for the education, not only in what it means to be a Christian, but also what it means to be a citizen. Thanks to him and the priests of his generation, I know what Jesus would do in present-day Guyana if he were here and saw the greed, the flippant environmental destruction, the growing inequality, the classism, the sexism, the lopsided agreements, the many advancing negative forces that are pulling our society even further apart. Father Malcolm lived his life to counter such negative forces. He put on his beret and went out and did the best he could do with what he had. And he did it with the best intentions for all of us. Not some of us, all of us. He found the bravery over and over again to help right win over wrong. As we say goodbye and mark his achievements, we are in fact honoring and valuing those qualities that made him a great citizen. May we keep his memory and work alive by honoring and valuing those qualities in ourselves, perhaps finding those qualities in ourselves going forward. This is his gift, for which so many of us that have been touched by his light are grateful. Rest in peace, Father. You earned it.
That was Simone Mangal. Jolie sending that tribute. Thank you for your attentiveness while we shared that tribute via the phone. It's almost 5:30. We are the Our Lady of Fatima Church here in Georgetown as we share and reflect and celebrate Father Malcolm Rodrigues' life. The funeral, there'll be a joint funeral tomorrow for both Father Malcolm as well as Father Bob Barrow at 10 o'clock at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. We do have 5 other persons who had indicated beforehand that they would like to give tributes, but looking at the time and just giving you an opportunity to give us a sense of how many persons who are here this afternoon and would like to give a tribute, perhaps by a show of hands, just so we'll know how we can pace the remainder of the hour that we have. Okay, so we're making good time. Thank you very much for that indication. We will continue now, and now invite Sister Marie Harper from the Ursuline Sisters to come forward for her tribute, or for the tribute on behalf of the sisters.
Good evening, everyone. Father Malcolm was well known to the Ursulines from the early years as a boy, serving at the altar at Camp Street as an altar server in our convent chapel. Fast forward to when I first visited Guyana in 1986. He was now a priest, of course, and continued to serve as a priest. Then he was full of energy and always seemed to have time for the sisters. I recall him joining the sisters for breakfast after celebrating Mass. Although a very busy man, he gave you the sense that he had time for you. Sisters Magdalene and Rita would have long conversations at the dining table about all sorts of things. And this is where these 2 elderly sisters would pick up all that was going on. He would never leave his dishes on the table as he joined in the washing up and drying. A spirit of being a member of the family. He seemed very comfortable with us. You see, in his struggle for democracy, for people, many times he escaped those who were trying to silence him by hiding away in the convent. We had a room actually called the priest room by the chapel, and he would stay there until things cooled down. I heard many stories. And this was not because he was a coward. Jesus himself knew when it was not his time and when to stay quiet. When I first met Father Malcolm, I looked at him and I looked at a statue of St. Joseph in our chapel. Tall and slim, and similar hairstyle, and handsome. In the face of that statue, as was in Malcolm, there was a gentleness and kindness. During my short stay in Guyana then, 1986-1987, Father Malcolm was the priest whom we called in the early hours of the morning when we had two sisters dying, one following the other in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. Sister Brigitte and Sister Elizabeth. He did the last rites. He was there early morning. I believe he celebrated the funeral mass, can't recall, and also went to the cemetery. He was one priest who would make every effort to go to the cemetery to be with the respective families at any funeral. On my return in 1998 to Guyana for this long haul, I've been here just about 25 years, there was Father Malcolm in the forefront of assisting with setting up of the Marian Academy. He valued Catholic education. He sat on the board of directors for some time. It was he, I recall very much so, who did the opening prayer on the first day of school on September 14, 1998, and also blessed the site where we are presently located. He celebrated our first Christmas Mass, and so this very Christmas, I recall the occasion vividly. How could I forget his passion for education? Never. His passion for justice and peace and integrity of creation. When we celebrated World Peace Day at school, he was always a part of the celebration whenever he was around and brought the peace plant as long as he was able to. He loved flowers and was always asking for a clipping of any new plant, or he would bring from his collection. He understood and lived being in love with creation. And so it's no surprise about his fight and struggle to preserve the environment and save it. I personally felt Father Malcolm's support in so many ways as we struggled to begin Marian Academy. Sister Mary Peter recalls in the 1970s when Father Malcolm was teaching at the University of Guyana. She often went over from Cyril Potter College, where she was then teaching, to use the computer in his office to type her mathematics exams papers, because she did not, as she says, did not have a machine with all the math symbols to use. Frequently, she said, there would be a knock on the door and someone would come looking for Father Malcolm to help them with some problem, finding a job, solving a family problem, or anything. Another recollection, she said, was during the Great Strike, when all the miners at Linden were on strike. He helped to arrange for farmers from Port Morant to send food supplies to the strikers. He cared for people. And this one is very close home to us because we live in the adjoining compound, as you would say, to St. Rose's. She recalled on the night of Walter Rodney's death, he was in the presbytery at Brickdam when he got the news. He came immediately to St. Rose's auditorium where Mrs. Rodney and her children were at a movie, escorted them home, and remained with them all night while police were ransacking their home. Later, he had to identify Rodney's body. Father Malcolm had no difficulty in that task. He was a man for the people, with the people, and moved among them. His option for the poor, the marginalized, he stood for that. We will remember Father Malcolm for his simplicity, humility, compassion, his deep love and passion for justice and peace, and care for the environment.
Thank you very much, Sister Marie Harper. We continue to reflect, share, and celebrate the life of a notable priest, an academic, a social activist, a social justice advocate, be it political rights, environmental rights, champion for the poor, and patriotic Guyanese. May I now invite Justin Thompson, the twin of Father Joel Thompson, our most recent Guyanese priest, to play for us Hymn for Guyana's children, after which we will continue with the tributes. Thank you, Justin. We continue with the tributes. Of course, we have with us Bishop Francis, the Superior of the Jesuits, Father Peter McIsaacs, a number of our priests, our sisters, and a number of our well-known Guyanese. Is anybody from the University of Guyana here? I don't know if it's in... We do have a representative. Is the Vice Chancellor here? Did she? Okay, so you're making, okay. We will have your tribute in a moment. I now invite Rajana, who is doing a tribute on behalf of her brother, Indar Singh.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is with much sadness that I begin by offering my deepest condolences to the bereaved family, including the church family, on the passing of Father Malcolm. These occasions are always sad, but when tempered with gratitude and admiration for the person who has passed, we who are left behind can always remain ever hopeful that more role model examples, such as the one offered by Father Malcolm, will come into fruition and influence our lives in a positive way. Next, I will proceed to read written reflections sent by my brother Indar Singh, whose association with Father Malcolm spanned many years. As I watched my brother's interaction with Father Malcolm, I can attest to the impact that both he and Father Morrison had on my own life and the lives of my siblings. Regrettably, my brother could not travel to be with us today, but has asked me to express his thoughts, sentiments, and prayers through these reflections. And I quote, "I stand here today to pay tribute to a kind soul, an indulgent heart, and a disciplined mind, a mentor in my life, Father Malcolm Anthony Rodrigues. The Roman statesman Cicero said that life given us by nature is short, but the memory of a life well spent is eternal.
Sisters and brothers, Malcolm's life was well spent, for it enriched and touched the lives of so many people, from parishioners to politicians, laborers to students, the oppressed, and yes, the liberated. He was a man for all seasons and had something positive to offer everyone. He was truly extraordinary. I was privileged to have known Malcolm for over 45 years, to call him a friend and a mentor, and had the opportunity to observe him in close settings, having a front row seat to the ongoing life of this wonderful human being. He was committed and a dedicated Jesuit who worked tirelessly to promote human development and better the lives of all, particularly the least amongst us, and was not afraid to collaborate with non-believers, people of different faiths, atheists, and others, if it would realize this agenda. Through it all, he never sought to impose his beliefs on others out of respect for their dignity and independence. During the political turbulence of the 70s and 80s, Malcolm was fully involved in many facets of the struggle for free and fair elections in Guyana, serving from the pulpit, the boardroom, the Union Hall, and on the streets. No task or assignment was too trivial for him. He helped us tremendously at the Catholic Standard, serving in many capacities and never taking credit for the many successes of this little newspaper. Producing this paper entailed long hours of daily manual work, done in difficult and trying conditions. But at the end of a hard day, generally in the wee hours of the morning, he would say, "It's bubble time," and would persuade Father Morrison to break out bottles of baby bubbly for us to drink while unwinding. Malcolm loved cricket and football, loved the musical group Bonnie M, loved to grow and nurture potted plants. He once completed the grueling London Marathon when he was in his 50s. And he would say, "Not bad for a casual runner." He was sharp and quick-witted, had an infectious laugh, and loved a good joke. Here are a few examples. He referred to a prominent but controversial Brickdam parishioner as a, quote, bigwig, who threw his weight around, unquote. The man wore a wig and was heavy-set. During the gas crisis of the late 80s, he said that we had a donkey cart economy and a coal pot flavor. When the group Compass was formed but didn't last long, he concluded that the compass simply pointed north and everyone got off. He referred to the then unreliable textile mill as Mextile Mill, and that the glass factory never worked because it fell down and broke. He was referred to as the gobbler in our circle, having the ability to quickly gobble up and digest large amounts of information. His ability to laugh at things we had no control of helped us to get through those dark days. He never seemed burdened by his tremendous workload and discharged his daily and varied responsibilities with grace, moving seamlessly from one to the other. For many years, he started his day
by saying Mass for the nuns at the Ursuline convent. In his later years before his sickness and after UG, he returned to doing what he loved most, serving as a parish priest in the poor and remote territories, away from the centers of populations, embracing and living the Jesuit missionary life rooted in the preferential option for the poor. His was a life that shined brightly, through which the paths of others were illuminated. His was also a life that exemplified brilliance in every capacity. Richard Rousseau, author and screenwriter, says, and I quote, "Lives are like rivers. Eventually they go where they must, not where we want them to go." We know he's gone home to the Lord and is asking us to embrace service, love, compassion, and selflessness the way he did. This is no small order, but we pray for the strength, courage, and fortitude to help us live up to these ideals. As I conclude, please allow Malcolm to speak through me once more. He asks me to tell you that life is short, and yet it is all we have. So when you make a mistake, apologize. Don't get caught up with your ego. Swallow your pride. Care for the ones you love and serve the less fortunate. And finally, be true to yourself in all things. Goodbye, dear friend. You fought the good fight. Keep the faith and finish. Keep the faith. You fought the good fight, kept the faith, and finished the course. May the choirs of angels come to greet you. May they speed you to paradise. May the Lord enfold you in his mercy. May you find eternal life. My brother Indar Singh, thank you.
Thank you, Rajana. Reading on behalf of your brother Indar Singh. I'm down to my final two tributes. I'll ask Sister Antoinette for the Carmelites and the representative from the St. John's Bosco Orphanage to come up next, after which we will invite those who indicated that they'd like to give tributes to go next. It's 10 minutes to 6 o'clock, so we're making good time as we acknowledge all of you who are with us, as well as those of you who are online, both on YouTube and on Facebook.
Yeah. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. In one of his exhortations to priests and religious, Pope Francis said, "The shepherd must smell like his sheep." Father Malcolm certainly portrayed this to us. He was fondly called by us Carmelites in Guyana as Carmelite Protector. And I am sure that the other religious women in the diocese also felt the same way. I remember that he was very concerned that we religious women should have the opportunity to attend Mass every day, and he would frequently call to ask if we had Mass.
especially on our special feasts and commemorations. If we didn't, then he would pop around when he could to celebrate Mass for us. He also was very concerned about our physical welfare, bringing food for the sisters in the days they had little. He was a good and kind-hearted priest who loved the elderly, the sick, and the shut-ins. So concerned was he that when one sister fell unconscious with a stroke after Mass, he lifted the sister into his little mini-moke, a little white mini-moke, because the ambulance was taking too long in coming, and he drove her to the Mercy Hospital. This happened on 2 occasions that I recall. Whenever a sister was admitted to hospital, he was one of the first priests to arrive there and pray, anoint, and keep vigil, and regularly visit her. It happened one day after the celebration of Mass. A homeless man who seemed mentally ill ran through our front door towards Father Malcolm. My first thought was that he was coming to harm Father, and I sought to push him out of the house. Father calmly told me, "Leave him alone. He is my friend." And he took out a small piece and handed it to him. He left quietly after thanking Father. And then Father Malcolm explained to us that this man always looked out for his car when he was on the road. My friends in Barataria Parish, where he was posted for a short while in Trinidad, said they loved him and looked forward to going to church every Sunday because Father Rodrigues' homilies were so simple yet profound and practical, and they were always punctuated with relevant stories. None of his priestly duties were ever a burden to him, and he went above his call of duty in the name of charity, always giving sound advice, listening to them attentively, and always available to his parishioners. They said that he paid particular attention to the elderly, visiting them at their homes, and even going for them when they had no one to carry them so that they could attend Mass. There is so much to be said, or that can be said, of Father Malcolm. But at this point, we just want to thank his family, and we want to thank the Jesuits for nurturing such a shepherd. He was a gem of a priest whose memory we will treasure dearly. We are certain that God has received this good shepherd into his presence. May he rest in peace.
Thank you very much, Sister Antoinette. And now the tribute from St. John's Bosco Orphanage, and Lawrence Lachman Singh will follow immediately after that. And then we move into the open tributes.
Good evening, everyone. So on behalf of the boys of the St. John's Bosco Orphanage, I'll be giving a tribute through song. Close up. Sorry. Ben. All right. So I'd like to thank the Jesuits community for their contributions towards my educational journey at the university. And Father Malcolm, my memory of him would be when I was a little boy at the orphanage. He used to come and show us movies, and every time before those movies, he would just tell us some stories. And those little moments is something that I will remember and cherish. I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up till I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. And every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. In darkest nights, you were close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. Say, all my life you have been faithful, and all my life you have been so, so good. And every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so it's almost 6 o'clock. I hope I'm not asking too much. If I could ask those who still will like to give tributes now, if you could come a little closer so that we can see you and we can pace the remainder of our time. So perhaps the two front benches, if you please. In the meanwhile, I invite Lawrence Lachman Singh with his tribute.
Good evening, everyone. I know it's late. I'll try not to be long. There's very little left to say because everything before was true and everything before was all Malcolm. I don't think he'd have been really excited about this event, quite frankly. But we all know we couldn't quite tell him thank you properly before he died. I did speak with him and sit with him just before COVID. And I think it was difficult to have that conversation about what was happening, what was he thinking. But the one thing you could talk to him about and you would get a clear response was those difficult days with Rodney, with the government, with elections. Those things seemed to have occupied a very deep recess within him, and it came out. I didn't know quite what I was going to say here. As I said, you've pretty much all said it before. But as a young man, working with him at the Electoral Assistance Bureau, working on fair elections when it was actually dangerous to do so. I wanted to bring up this little report. And this report, President Ramatai will remember it from '97. Malcolm and I and Claremont Lai and Hugh Chumley and Pearson Burt Smith and a few others worked really hard to try and analyze how the '97 election went. Remember, the PPP was in power in '97, but we got the most, I think, attacks from the other side. And I couldn't understand as a young man why we were being attacked for what I thought was objective work. And I asked Malcolm, for all that's been said about his fight for justice and his standing with the poor, his liberation theology that he lived, I could not understand why we should be attacked. And he explained to me, and it sort of has really struck me over the years, that we knew that whoever won the election, we should say that. We were after a fair election. We were not anti anybody or pro anybody, but for the system. And what he said to me was, don't take these things personally, these attacks that come your way. All of us are Guyanese. All of us are God's people. And when I think about Malcolm in the days to come, I will remember his way of following Jesus. He didn't just drop out of the sky from the Rodrigues family and end up being the man we know. He learned from Jesus about sacrifice and taking risks and standing up and being willing to die. So in his own way, I think Malcolm lived the gospel and was ready to die. He might have actually been disappointed that he wasn't killed along the way. Like any good patriot, you don't want to live out your days long, because the good die young, right? He would have wanted, I think, to have given his all if that was what it was needed when he was younger. So Malcolm, this is not quite your gospel, but you have written to us through it. There's a preface in this report where he speaks about the need to go beyond elections into the world of democracy and promoting fairness beyond just an election event. And I think those words are still true today. It's a challenge for many of us who he has left behind. Malcolm, we know you couldn't take it all the way as you would have liked to do. We know that your health faded you, but we're thankful for all the sacrifices and leadership that you gave to us across the country, not just for Catholics, but for all citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Regrettably, His Lordship Bishop Francis had to leave for a 6 p.m. appointment, but he did want to share a tribute. I'm sorry we missed it, but for those of you who have stayed since 4:30, thank you very much. We're hoping to go until about 6:30, and so now we will invite from the persons who indicated. I may not know your names, or but you'll just come forward when I call, or when you're invited to do so. But just wanted to share, as I think the university tribute will come up first. Even though Father Malcolm's memory was failing in recent years, some events did not fade, I made to understand, chatting with his brothers. He clearly enjoyed teaching at the University of Guyana. His dementia caused him to think that he was late for classes at the university. It was admirable that such an advanced age that he still had a concern for students that might have been waiting for him. It was embedded in his mind. So With that, I'd like now to invite the tribute from the University of Guyana.
Good evening. I'm Thomas Singh, and I follow my brother, David Singh, whose tribute for Father Malcolm Rodrigues probably might say a lot more about Malcolm and UG than I myself would be able to say. So I'd like to thank David for having shared a more intimate tribute about Malcolm's life at UG. Let me say, however, that he was a strong, forceful member of the University of Guyana Workers' Union, but forceful in a different way, a way that involved a smile more than often and a capacity never to be angry. He was head of the Department of Physics and ultimately became Deputy Vice Chancellor in all those spheres, exhibiting the Malcolm that we knew, someone with an authentic voice, someone who, as I mentioned before, would not get angry, but someone who would have the right response on every occasion. My tribute to Father Rodrigues, Father Malcolm, goes, however, beyond the University of Guyana, and strangely enough, it involved Father Rodrigues being more of a shadow, but in a powerful way for me. As a nervous youngster from Leguan, I showed up at St. Stanislaus College, very happy when during assembly I was aware that Malcolm Rodrigues, Father Rodrigues, was standing at the entrance of the physics lab. And so I knew that here was someone with a master's in physics teaching at my school, among the other Jesuits, of course. So that mattered. But as I said, Father Rodrigues was in the background, in the forefront of my awareness, however. And then when Father Bernard Dark was killed, was assassinated, when all of us might have expected it to have been more Father Malcolm Rodrigues, I remember distinctly in the college forum again, that service where, the scouts played an important part. I think Mike McCormack, it would have been just before we proceeded to the cathedral. I remember seeing Father Malcolm out of the corner of my eye, as I myself did a little presentation, having been in the forefront of the students in those days. So Father Rodrigues, while being for many of us, students at St. Stanislaus College and citizens of Guyana, people who played some sort of a role, Father Rodrigues was there as our teacher, as a shadow that represented strength and it represented a moral compass. It was later, after the assassination of Father Dark, that I would encounter Father Rodrigues in all places over at the Guyana Human Rights Association. Again, not saying very much, but those of us who were involved as young people knew that he was in the forefront of things. And it was a reassuring thing for us that there was, for me, the Father Rodrigues was there, validating my presence there as a student in St. Stanislaus College because Father Rodrigues was there. And I would not have known the details, the intimate details of his work at the Catholic Standard and elsewhere. But as a young person in those days, we had a sense that Malcolm Rodrigues was navigating something that was quite complex, that involved life and death. But he did so with a smile. He did so in a non-contentious fashion, quite unlike me. as I evolved, he did so with strength. He did so inspiring us. So, right now, as I think about the University of Guyana and Father Rodrigues' legacy at the University of Guyana, I actually am thinking to myself that maybe it wasn't just the now, what we know it to be, the School of Earth and Environmental Studies that grew out of the Environmental Studies unit that my brother spoke about, but perhaps it's the Green Institute that I now direct at the University of Guyana. And I say that with a great sense of humility, thinking to myself that I never spoke to Father Rodrigues. By then, of course, it would have been difficult to do so, about the work that I had done. But he was really following in the footsteps of this gentleman, attracting criticism, often quite unnecessarily, in a rather misguided way, but hopefully, and this would be my really personal tribute to Father Rodrigues de Malcolm, hopefully with an authentic voice similar to his. May he rest in peace.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas Singh, and now I invite Mr. Michael McCormack from the Ghana Human Rights Association.
Thank you, Michelle. I know it's getting late, so I won't keep you very long. But one of the things that I think people may not appreciate who only know Malcolm from his sort of public activism is that I benefit from having met Malcolm when he was 18 and I was 18. And we spent about 5 years together studying. I had no sense of the later Malcolm and the activism. Malcolm, and the sort of vignettes in my memory, what I most stuck with me was his love of life, and he was fun to be with. And he had this electric personality that he got people enthused about things. And his kind of big enthusiasms when he was really young, he was a very good table tennis player. And he really liked films, with endless groups of people discussing films and so on. He was a good gardener as well. One thing that sticks with me is the fact that during one really bitter winter in the UK, Malcolm latched on to ice skating, of all things. And he learned to ice skate. And being Malcolm, he never liked doing things by himself, so he rounded up everybody else to learn to ice skate in his little circle of friends. We all suffered through this. Malcolm waltzed around and we sort of tottered about for a bit. But it sticks with me as one of the lighter things. And when we later met up in Guyana in the late 60s, he took me round to his aunt, lived on Durban, not on Durban Street, on Duncan Street. And he took me to lunch there. I'd hardly been in Guyana more than a couple of weeks. And I always remember it because his aunt had put a plate of what I thought were sort of Guyanese carrots or something on the table. And it turned out they were really hot peppers, which when I cut into them and sat with them, I thought I was going to die. But we got over it, and I just took that Malcolm, as I say, was a lot of fun. What was interesting with Malcolm as well is that Malcolm on the quarantine taught for a year or two at Chandy Singh High School. And that passed off. I visited him when he was down there living in a house in Rose Hall and so on. What I didn't appreciate was the significance of what I think was going on there. And it's only after Malcolm left in 1970, and he spent 4 years in Mexico, and he came back with a level of radicalism, if you like, that hadn't been evident before, in that he had a clearer understanding of why he was promoting the issues he was promoting. The kind of theological basis he had gathered in Mexico was something that the church in Guyana had much of in that systematic way previously. And the interesting thing about the activism that the President mentioned of Malcolm with the sugar workers, the welfare committee, and the striking teachers in the quarantine, and the Anna Rampersad trials, is that it was a reaching out, in one sense, to the Indo-Guyanese community, which in the previous decade, the embraced by the church of the sort of anti-communist ideology that was prevalent had spilled over to something that strained relations between the Indo community and the Catholic Church. And what Malcolm and the other Jesuits were doing was a corrective to that aspect of politics, and I don't think had been sufficiently understood. I personally am indebted to Malcolm because I was fired from the University of Guyana shortly after we started the Guyana Human Rights Association. I wasn't in Guyana at the time it happened. Malcolm got in touch with me and told me I'd been fired. And he got the university staff and students on strike over the issue. It didn't disturb Mr. Burnham. He wasn't impressed with the striking and so on. And so I remained fired. But Malcolm, the solidarity he had with me, I really much appreciated. I don't want to delay things here, but he was a wonderful person. I commiserate very much with the Jesuits over his loss. And the one thing that we miss with Malcolm is that his reaching out to work with people that organizations he didn't join. He supported what the WPA were doing. He supported what a number of the trade unions were doing. He related to the PPP on a number of specific issues. He related to the Guyana Human Rights Association. I don't think he actually joined any of these organizations, but he related to what they were trying to do. And it's noticeable now that we don't have that bridge building. I think the bridge building wasn't something just peculiar to Malcolm. Ricky Singh in journalism, and Walter Rodney in politics, and Bishop George with human rights. These were people that all reached out to other communities that they didn't naturally belong to. It's noticeable now we don't have that kind of bridge building. And I think as a society we'll suffer from it. So hopefully we can be inspired by what Malcolm did, and may he rest in peace. And I'm sure wherever he is, there's a lot of fun going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike McCormack. We're into the final 15 minutes of this evening of sharing and reflection and tributes to the late Father Malcolm Rodrigues SJ.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, saints. I am Raphael Hazel. Those of you on social media know me as Raphael Nation, Delano Raphael. I want to share what impressed me about Father Malcolm Rodrigues from a time when I knew him as I was a student at the University of Guyana. I was an 18-year-old, an impressionable student, and Father Malcolm Rodrigues was my professor. And you know what they say? You don't really remember what people say, but you remember how they make you feel. Well, Father Malcolm Rodrigues was the person who made us feel happy. Whenever you see him coming, you felt happy, you felt joy. You're always happy to see Father Malcolm Rodrigues. And what I remember from those days in 1988, when I started the University of Guyana and I studied physics, is that Father Malcolm Rodrigues was a priest who was a physicist. It blew my mind. Here was a priest who was a physicist. He was an administrator, and he did not lack the common touch. So here is how I remember him as a priest on the university campus. At Christmas time, Father Malcolm Rodrigues would organize the university choir. And Father Malcolm Rodrigues would get everybody, he would amass a large choir at Christmas time, every Christmas time, to sing Christmas carols, and they would put on a show. And I joined that choir. It blew my mind. A priest changing the atmosphere of the university campus by organizing a choir. I even remember songs from those days. Remember, the good news traveling around the world is telling people of the many races of the coming of the Jesus kingdom on the earth. And everywhere the people who believe are finding freedom and the grand release, and from their sins are now set free. Take comfort now, those skies are gray. Jesus will come and he will reign. Take comfort now, those skies are gray. Jesus will come and he will stay. That is what Father Malcolm Rodrigues taught me on the campus of the University of Guyana when he was the choir master. So that is how I remember him. I remember him as a 40-something-year-old young, sprightly man who motivated, changed the atmosphere. He brought enthusiasm. He brought life and culture to the university campus. He gave me my first job. So Father Malcolm was not only a physicist, he was a physicist who graduated from Oxford University. So he taught me physics. He taught me Einstein's theory of special relativity. You know, about length contraction and time dilation when you approach the speed of light. He taught me quantum mechanics. He taught me the tunneling effect. He taught me the fundamental forces of nature. There are only 4 fundamental forces in nature. What are they? Gravitation, the electromagnetic force, the strong force, and the weak force. These are subatomic forces. He taught me about the standard model. So I went on to do my master's and I did my PhD in biophysics because of the foundation I received from Father Malcolm Rodrigues at the University of Guyana. He gave me my first job. Father Malcolm Rodrigues hired me to teach physics after I graduated. And then he allowed me to compete for, and I got a scholarship, a Fulbright scholarship to study in the US, did my PhD and so on. But I remember the very first conference I attended in Italy, 22-year-old, never traveled to Europe before, didn't know my way around. Father Malcolm Rodrigues arranged for me to stay with the Jesuit priests in Wimbledon because I'm flying British Airways They're going to give me a 16-hour layover in London. I have nowhere to stay. So he called up the Jesuit missions in Wimbledon, arranged for them to pick me up at Gatwick, put me up overnight at the Jesuit missions, give me bed and breakfast, took me to Heathrow in the morning, and then I fly on to Italy, where I attended my first conference at the International Center for Theoretical Physics. Came back 3 weeks later, and they did the same in reverse. Picked me up from Heathrow, put me up overnight, took me to the airport to Gatwick in the morning, sent me on to Georgetown. And the only thing I was asked to do was to bring back some medicines for Father Malcolm. So the priests in London wanted to send some medicines back home to Guyana for him, and that is all that I was asked to do. It blew my mind. So this is how I remember Father Malcolm Rodrigues, a guy who had global connections, and a guy who could arrange from Georgetown for me to have smooth and safe passage through London to Rome and Trieste and Milan, and back through London to Georgetown, Guyana. He had global connection. And so in those days, as a 22-year-old young lecturer, I thought this guy knew the entire world. This is my memory of Father Malcolm Rodrigues. And so I remember him as the dean of the physics department, and then the deputy vice chancellor, and then starting the environmental studies unit. He was a priest who was an academic, a priest who saw no conflict between his faith and the stringent requirements of science, physics in particular. And so when I went on to do my PhD in physics, I remembered that I learned from one of the best. In those days when you're challenged, when you're studying with people from all over the world, remember the best physicists actually in those days came from Eastern Europe. Some of my smartest competitors in the physics program came from places like Croatia and Hungary and so on, because they had a very, very stringent program in physics. So I met them in New York, and they gave me a run for my money. But I remembered Father Malcolm Rodrigues teaching me fundamental forces in physics, fundamental science, and I remembered that he knew some of the people who came up with these theories. He would teach me as a first-hand representative of the theories. He actually met some of these professors at Oxford, right? So I had the confidence of knowing that I learned the truth and it was solid and I could rely on, gave me the kind of confidence to compete. That is how I remember Father Malcolm Rodrigues, as a priest who brought music to the campus at the University of Guyana. And so I'm going to ask you to commemorate him by singing this song that you all know at this Christmas time. He actually transformed the university during Christmas season. Joy to the world, the Lord has come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing. Just the first verse of that. Let's sing. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare him room, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing, and heaven and nature sing. That is how I want you to remember Father Malcolm Rodrigues.
Thank you, Raphael. And we have to now start pulling the pieces together as we celebrate and think about how we are going to upkeep this legacy of Father Malcolm in our own ways, in our own spaces. And so I'm just looking around to make sure that I captured everyone that had indicated. I know we've got 3 minutes to go before 6:30, and I'm deeply appreciative of all of your time that you've spent here since 4:30. So just making sure, one final glance around our church. Former president has stayed for the duration of this reflection, this evening of reflection. And so, just as we conclude, I look and I see Father Chris and Father Paul, and I was reminded that the staff of the house that Father Malcolm was staying in the last 4 years or so, Arupe House in Ornock Street in Queenstown, that the staff there would comment on Father Rodrigues' polite manners, even with his failing memory. Whenever he entered a room, he greeted everyone. If he was given something, he would always say thank you. And so while his memory may have been fading these last few years, his manners did not. And I think that speaks so much of the importance of instilling values in our young people. And so one young person, our final tribute this evening, will be given by young Brad D'Souza on behalf of the brothers and sisters from Bartica who are online, and they've asked Brad to bring this tribute. So we'll have a young person, Brad, as our closing tribute this evening.
Good evening, everyone. I know time is of the essence, so I'll make my tribute quite short. On behalf of myself, my family, the parish St. Anthony's RC Church Bartica, the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Conference in Bartica, which Father Malcolm established, and all who are here today that did not get a chance to speak, our condolences to his family, and we, the family of the Catholic Church, who knew Father Malcolm in whatever way. I know that many of our parishioners shared a close relationship with Father Malcolm, and in my opinion, he was the best priest I've ever known. I can share many stories on behalf of our parishioners tonight, but I'll minimize it because time. One thing I like to point out about Father Malcolm, and we'll have it quite soon come Thursday, is Christmas Novena. Father Malcolm was known in Bartica as the priest that woke many of the Barticians up at 4 a.m. from the 15th of December to the 23rd, when he would toll the bell to indicate to us Catholics and even the Anglicans that you have 1 hour to get to church for 5 every novena. Father Malcolm was very close with my family. He loved my grandmother's fruitcake every Christmas. And we all rejoice as children when you see him hopping along the riverside, coming to spend the Sunday afternoons. I remember him as someone who was very joyful, kind, and he always stood up for what he believed in. In closing, in reflection of his memory, we have a short poem. He took his call seriously. He submitted and surrendered. He accepted God's calling, and in doing so, found his greatest treasure. I'm quite sure there were times when it was challenging, but I'm even more certain that in his moments of challenge, you'd never find him wavering. He has gone before us, and his life is now a great legacy. But let us not forget to treasure him and always carry him in our memory. One thing I can say is that he set the bar high for many. His love, life, laughter, and kindness was comfort and solace to any. A message I recall he preached fervently is that to die means to live with God our Father for eternity. Truly I can say, Father Malcolm was a priest unlike any other. He shall be missed, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and forever. But alas, to you we say fly away. and rest in the arms of your beloved Savior, in whose presence we are sure you find comfort today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad D'Souza. Friends, all, I think I could call all of you friends, right? Our evening of sharing and reflection is almost at a close. I know that, at least for me, I'm feeling inadequate in the sense that, oh gosh, how could we upkeep this legacy of Father Malcolm? But I know with your support and your continued advocacy in your respective spheres of life, we can continue what Father Malcolm has started. Tomorrow, we will have the funeral. It's going to be a requiem mass for both Father Malcolm and Father Bob Barrow, who once described Father Malcolm, and I quote, "It is a strong claim, but Malcolm has probably had a more positive effect in the lives of Guyanese than any other Jesuit in the history of the region." And so tomorrow, those two priests, we will bid farewell to them at 10 o'clock at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, and we invite you to join us for that. Sister Julie Matthew will give a eulogy for Father Bob, and Major General Joe Singh will give a eulogy for Father Malcolm. Tomorrow is also the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and Father Malcolm had a very strong conviction and relation, having spent some time in Spain. And so it's fitting that on this feast day tomorrow that we will bid him farewell. And so to close, we have captured, I hope, all of the facets of the life of Father Malcolm, but it will be remiss of us not to end in prayer. And so I'd like now to invite our youngest Guyanese priest, having been ordained only in June of this year, to close our evening with prayer, after which Justin will play a piece of music. And if you can stay and catch up with each other, you are invited to do so. Or if not, we'll see each other at 10 o'clock tomorrow. So Father Joel, who has just arrived from the Rupununi, he was on the final flight, and so we are so happy that he was able to join us and to pray with us this evening.
So good evening, let us stand. And let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we come to you today in praise and thanksgiving for the life of Father Malcolm, the life of Father Bob. We thank you for all that they have done. Inspire us to follow their example in serving you and in putting you before all else. We humbly make this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.